Welcome to Mind Your Autistic Brain Podcast with Social AUtie. That's me, Carole Jean. And today, my incredible, beautiful, and super talented guest is Nancy Pearsall from Texas. Nancy has a fabulous Instagram account. You are going to want to go follow it. It's Enigma Creative. Make sure you check the show notes below and get that link and contact information to meet and greet Nancy. Nancy, I'm so excited you are here. We have been planning this for a couple weeks, and I am so excited to finally get here.
Thank you so much. I'm super excited. Thank you so much for having me, Carole Jean. It is a pleasure.
Well, I am super excited that we are here together because you have so many beautiful insights, thoughts, and just the way that you see the world and the way that you put it into words. The way you write is just such a gift and a blessing. And I know in our community, we have some incredibly talented writers. Nancy, you are way up there in that group in those talented writers for sure.
Thank
Nancy,
you.
I want you to tell the story, if you don't mind sharing with everybody, how you got the title and the name Enigma Creative on your Instagram account, because it's really cool and I love it.
Sure. So, it was probably like the very end of December 2019, January 2020, I had decided to start a new Instagram account, one specifically dedicated to my visual art and poetry, because I am a creative person. And I'd always wondered sort of why, where did the creativity come from? And to me, it was kind of an enigma. And so I decided to start this account called enigma.creative. And then I started slowly uploading some of my art to the account. But I was at the time in the middle of assessing whether or not I could be autistic. And I received my official diagnosis right as the account had kind of gone live. And so at that point, because this was such a big event in my life, receiving this learning that I'm autistic, the account became one for more like autism education and advocacy. And the creativity kind of took a back seat. And I've since started an actual another art dedicated account. But yes, now the name stuck. And so now people know me as Enigma Creative.
Well, I would have to beg to differ with you not having creative things on there, because the way that you write, just the photographs that you share, they are incredibly creative and artistic in their presentation for sure.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
It is a beautifully curated account. And I love how you share sort of where you are, what you're thinking, and sort of your journey and your evolution in this unfolding as you're going through these layers of, well, hey, I am XYZ age, because I don't always drop everybody's age. That's yours to tell. And as ladies, we don't share it. But, and in that is such a beautiful thing, because, there's somebody else that's on that same journey right now, and they're reading what you're posting, and they're nodding their head and they're going, oh my gosh, I'm not alone. Somebody else is experiencing this too. And I love that. So Nancy, share with us your autism story. What has your journey been? I mean, starting in that, how did you get to the diagnosis part of, this is on my radar?
Sure. So I guess I feel like in order, I should probably give a little backstory. And I will kind of go far back, and it's okay. I don't mind divulging my age, but I appreciate your discretion. I was 44 when I received my official diagnosis. I'm 45 now. To me, age is just a number. But I knew ever since I was a very young child that I was different, especially in groups. I always sensed my difference very, very keenly. At one point when I was about 8 years old, my family moved and I had to change schools, and I had a lot of trouble making new friends. And so I started experiencing very extreme anxiety, OCD type tendencies, cleaning my bedroom. Every morning before I would walk to the bus stop, I would break out in hives on my face from being so anxious. As far as being a student in school, I did really well in English and art, but I couldn't, I could barely do math to save my life. And when I became a teenager, I started struggling with substance use disorder, which is, something that there's a big stigma around, but I feel like there really shouldn't be. And
do you mind sharing just for a minute as a side note, Nancy, what is that?
Sure. So, so it is chemical dependency. And a lot of people, a lot of neurodiverse people will turn to using substances to kind of dampen or numb a lot of the sensory overload and overwhelm, the kind of racing thoughts, sometimes very intrusive thoughts that we don't want, that are very unpleasant. And also a lot of us, experience, especially if we're later identified in life, like much later identified, we tend to accumulate years and years of trauma from not knowing that we are neurodiverse, and we feel like we are failed, broken versions of neurotypical people. And so that's kind of what that's about.
I don't think that I could have explained it more beautifully or accurately than you did.
Thank you.
I think that's one of the biggest things in our late identified community that we all sort of come to the table with, are these, I'm 46, soon to be 47, and I was 39 when I found out that I was autistic. And I was like, oh, it makes so much sense. Mm-hmm. And you come to the table with these decades of trauma. Mm-hmm. You really do. And you don't realize that that's what it is. And, I turned to alcohol in a lot of ways in social situations in high school and college that probably didn't put me in very safe situations, and some pretty bad things happened. So that added to the trauma, but it was something to lessen the anxiety, to sort of control the racing thoughts in my head, to, allow me to quote unquote be normal in a situation, because that was the only way I could handle it. And to dampen some of those sensory things I didn't realize were a sensory thing going on. So I think that's a really great thing to share. Thank you, Nancy.
Yeah, you're very welcome. It's very important that people understand it is not to experience that is in no way a character flaw or a character defect or a moral shortcoming. And, with alcohol too, there is a physical dependency issue that is has its basis in chemistry. So it's very important that people understand that. And
that's a big part of our journey as late identified people, is just giving ourselves some grace, some space, and some forgiveness, because we were doing the best we could do with what we knew. And now we're learning new things about ourselves, and our awareness is growing daily. Mm-hmm. So from this point forward, we're making these intentional choices, and we're no longer living a life where we're constantly reactionary. I felt like for decades I was constantly reactionary to everything, including myself. And when I learned I was autistic, it was like all of a sudden, oh my gosh, I've got some choices and some options and some control. And then it was like all of a sudden there's this shift, and you can say, you know what? I'm not going to feel ashamed. I'm not going to feel guilty. I'm not going to feel bad. I'm choosing to let that go, because those feelings, those emotions, and those ideas and beliefs, they don't serve me anymore, because that's not me.
Exactly. Beautifully said. I couldn't have said it better. Yes. So as I kind of grew up in my early 20s, I began seeking psychiatric help for myself. And one doctor told me he thought that I could probably have ADHD, but when he, put me on the medications for that, they were stimulants. Well, I have an incredibly strong anxiety disorder. So those medications didn't work for me. And I just sort of forgot about that diagnosis for a long time, blew it off. And for a long time, my diagnoses were generalized anxiety disorder and depression, clinical depression, because I had been dissociating for many, many years, starting, as a teenager. So as time moved on, I moved into my 30s. I started working with a different psychiatrist who diagnosed me as having bipolar disorder because I had told him about some experiences that were frightening me, that I didn't understand. And I certainly didn't know that they were sensory experiences and that sensory processing disorder was even a thing. I was told that I was probably experiencing psychosis, and so I was put on antipsychotics and mood stabilizers for a decade, which negatively impacted my physical health, contributing toward a weight gain of 100 pounds eventually. And so around 2015, I'm still just trying to find out. I'm thinking, I'm taking these medications. And then at one point, I lost my job and I lost my health insurance. And I was terrified that I could no longer take my bipolar medication. Well, I ran out of my prescription. I couldn't afford it anymore. And I felt fine. I didn't feel any different. I noticed that I would go down these, I called them shame spirals before I even knew that was a kind of a term. I was calling it that myself. I would get sucked down into these, I felt like the black pit of hell. These certain events or interactions with people would set me off. But all in all, I'm a very even keel person, very, very even keel. I don't really have a temper per se, unless I'm experiencing, I'm extremely tired or something, or I'm having a sensory sensitivity. So I read about something called a highly sensitive person. And I also read about an INFJ personality. Well, I tested, the Myers-Briggs. I'm an INFJ. And so I thought, well, that's a very rare personality type in the world, supposedly. Maybe that's why have always felt so different. And maybe I'm a highly sensitive person. And maybe that's why I've always felt so different. But I talked with plenty of INFJ personalities and people who identified as highly sensitive, and we still didn't line up. Our experiences, I still felt like I was on the outside looking in, still looking for an answer. And then one day, early fall 2019, I received an email from an old friend, and it was just a link to a video by the famous psychiatrist or psychologist out of Australia, Tony Attwood. And the video was on how autism spectrum disorder could present in those assigned female at birth. And I watched the video and my jaw dropped open, hit the floor. I almost fell out of my chair, 44 years old, and all the lights in my head were just going off. And I thought, but wait a minute. And I'm not proud that I thought this way. I didn't know any better. I knew nothing about autism. And I thought, but Rain Man was like my only exposure, because I don't have kids. I don't have friends who have kids. I don't live in the world where autism exists, or I didn't.
You're not alone. That's how a lot of us come to it.
Yeah.
So it's not, don't feel bad about it. It's one of those things that's one of the things I talk about in our group, and why I started Mind Your Autistic Brain is that we all come to our autism knowledge about ourselves and the awareness about ourselves. And where we come to that is a very different place. And we all kind of start in that, this is sort of the language that I know. This is sort of what I kind of know. And then we move and we grow from there. And that's why it's so important to really be gentle, be kind, be patient, be understanding and nurturing to a person that's just coming to this same awareness that we found. And don't dogpile them because they use, high functioning or Asperger's or something like that. That's all they know right now. And it's our job as a community to elevate everyone and to create this vernacular that we're sharing. But we can't do that if what we're doing is cutting someone out who's just starting.
I totally agree. And thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, I started trying to educate myself on autism. So, at this point, I had not been assessed yet. I spent probably a couple of months doing my own research at home, watching videos on YouTube, reading articles, and trying to learn all about, how autism could present in different types of people. And once and there are, of course, many assessments that are online that people can take, and I consistently scored very high. And until I finally told my husband, I said, I feel like I need to get assessed. I feel like I know that I am, but after everything that I've been through, I need to hear it from somebody else. I need some validation, and, maybe, and then I felt, kind of weak, like, well, maybe I shouldn't need that, but whatever, it's where I was. And so I went, and I'll probably write actually a post on this first assessment at some point, but it was about as bad as one could expect. I had read online that those who are, assigned female at birth, because I actually consider myself to be kind of non-binary. But I had read that those, who are female or present as female can run into a lot of trouble trying to get assessments, because so many psychologists still are running on criteria, from the DSM from, I don't know what, like 1947 or something. I'm kidding, of course, but really outdated information. So I prepared, I found a place. Of course, immediately I discovered the multiple barriers that exist to getting an assessment. First of all, finding anybody that can assess an adult is very hard. Insurance never covers it. It's very expensive. If the person is female, or, again, there are like gender biases within the assessments that are not really cool, but there are different things that, should be taken into consideration. And so I prepared for this assessment for about almost, I don't know, it was over 3 months I had to wait to be seen. And I had the assessment. It was like the worst case scenario. I was asked ridiculous questions. And I was told that I could not possibly be autistic for a number of reasons that would probably be very triggering to people if any listeners right now.
There's a lot of people going, I already know what you're going to say.
Yeah, just anything and everything from you, in my opinion, this was the person assessing me saying this. You put you apply cosmetics really well. You managed to land a husband. You are able to work full time. You were able to walk up the stairs to my office. You can't possibly be autistic. I mean, it was things like, I asked her about Asperger's because I was using the term at the time. And I said, well, what about Asperger's? And she said, it doesn't exist. And you can go chase a label if you want to. She didn't get it at all. So I was traumatized. I told her she was wrong. And I walked out of her office. And
wait a minute, pause right there. Good for you.
Thank you.
Good for you, because that took a lot of courage. And I can't say that a lot of us would probably, like me personally, I don't know that I would do that. I would get home and I'd get to the car and be mad as a wet hen. But I love it that you did it in the moment. Good for you, Nancy.
Well, thank you. I did it as I was crying. I looked her in the eye and she said, why are you crying? And I said, because you're wrong. And that was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. But even harder was to find the strength to keep going, to find somebody else after all that preparation. But I found somebody, and she was willing to work with me on, her fee. She adjusted the fee down from like over $1,200 or something to $600 out of pocket. And the process took about a month. Anyway, so when I received my diagnosis, I, of course, by that time I was just, again, like I knew it in my bones, but I really wanted to hear it. And when she told me, I was there with my husband holding his hand on the couch, and I just started crying. And when we got back to our car after we left her office, I kept crying, and he was like, Johnny, my husband was like, why are you crying? And I said, because I've been so mean to myself all my life. I've been so mean to myself. And there was no reason for any of that. And other people have been so mean to me. So it's been, a mixture of relief, astonishment, all of the stages of grieving that you can imagine, depression, rage, bargaining. And it's hard because you don't get those years back. I feel like I lost my teens, my 20s, my 30s, all those opportunities. But I do ultimately believe that everything works out the way it does for a reason. Yeah. So,
Nancy, I want to ask you if you don't mind sharing, because I think that a lot of people come to that point where they've started the process to try and get an official answer. They want that validation of somebody else telling us, and a lot of people have hit that block where the person in the seat that can tell us and give us that validation we're looking for doesn't give it. As they've got these preconceived notions and they say, no, this couldn't possibly be you. You're wrong. And you know in your bones, just without a doubt, this is me. What was it? Because I feel like that's a really important thing to sort of share. What was it that you were thinking or feeling? What was it that kept you going? What was it that you were asking or thinking or telling yourself after that moment to say, you know what? I'm going to keep looking. What was your driver, your motivator in that, Nancy?
Thank you. That's a great question. I guess because by that point I had just read so much about it on my own and watched so many videos about autism on my own. And I noticed that you posted one of the tools that I used to prepare for my assessments was this unofficial list of traits in females that was written by Samantha Kraft. And you have it on the Mind Your Autistic Brain Facebook group, which I love that you have that there. So I took that there, and being the kind of cool nerd that I am, copied and pasted that into a Word document and went through and highlighted all of the traits that were listed in this document that she wrote. And then underneath it, in a different color, so I could see what I was writing, wrote how I thought that this particular trait that she had written down applied to me. And then that would get me thinking of a dozen other instances or experiences that were along the same lines. Yeah.
That is I'll make sure that I link that down in the show notes, and I'll have the article available. It was one of the things that when I read it, I was like, oh, wow. And it's like there's that one thing that prompts, a dozen other things that you start connecting all of these little dots. It's like the string theory, and I look like the FBI board, as I'm
oh my God, yes.
it all together.
Yes.
In this giant web, and it's like, it makes sense in my brain. And it's such a wonderful article, and it's actually on the Art of Autism is the website that hosted, and they started the Actually Autistic hashtag, which I love. It's really brings us together. Yeah.
It's been amazing. And so, it's ultimately learning this about myself has been the most empowering experience. Most people wouldn't think so because, there's the stigma with the label of, autism. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But, once you realize that autism, first of all, is completely separate from intelligence, it's a type of brain. It is comparing. So we've got, neurotypicals and we've got neurodivergent people. And it's apples and oranges. You wouldn't call, if an autistic person isn't orange, you wouldn't call an orange a defective apple. You wouldn't call, you wouldn't say that it has apple deficiency syndrome. It's a completely different thing. I've also heard the analogy of we have a different operating system. I love that too, because really it's not just our brains that are different. It's our entire nervous system, and there are a lot of like comorbid kind of conditions that do come into, well, that a lot of people who are on the spectrum can also have. And we literally experience and process reality differently from neurotypical people. And that's sort of, yeah, I'm sorry. Did you want to, I'm just keep going.
No, I am going with it because I'm over here on my end, nodding my head the whole time going, yes, yes, yes. Because that's really a big thing. I think that, it was one of the things that is such a gift as we start to learn more about ourselves as an autistic in the world, and seeing that it's not just because we, especially, the dive in research part of us, we go, okay, it's not just my brain. It's not just how I think. It's not just my sensory sensitivities. It's the whole thing. It's the body, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. I have POTS. There's all of these other things. I mean, as women, all you women out there, how the period feels, how the PMS feels, all the hormones, all the cramps, all the stuff that I remember as a young woman, as a young girl going, God, how do people handle this? I'm in so much pain. I mean, it's like this, it hurts for the sheet to touch my skin the week before I have a period. And you're thinking, this is nuts. How is this possible? And then you get it to be an adult autistic woman. You talk to other autistic females and they're like, oh yeah, I totally get that.
Yes.
That makes sense. It's the heightened nervous system sensitivity. But you don't start to tie all this together until you get your answer. You're an orange. You're not an apple.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there were tiny little things, like little hints that, before I even received the email from my old friend tipping me off, I was like, something is just really unusual. And I felt like bizarre about the way that I experienced the world. Like I would be like walking from my car up into my front door, and the rain, if it was raining, might be hitting part of my arm, my bare arm that didn't have a jacket on it or something. And I would become instantly furious and so angry and irritable. And I was like, well, what's that about? Anytime that an ambulance would go by, not only would I have to cover my ears, I would feel like I was about to throw up because the sound was so piercing. I've heard a neuro rebel, Krista Holman's, talk about fluorescent lighting and how it gives her migraines. Well, same here. Just all kinds of things. And so, yeah, I mean, it's just kind of, it's kind of incredible.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you a question because several of us here on the podcast have admitted to some of our things. You don't have to, but a few of us have been proprietors and procurators of certain things. I have unscrewed light bulbs in places because the light bulb hums and it was driving me crazy. My friend Carly has taken batteries out of the clocks that were ticking too loud in a doctor's office.
Wow.
So, can you think of anything you might have done? Like my friend Jason took somebody's bat and hit it outside of a window because if they hit that ball one more time down that hallway, he was going to break it over somebody. So he hit it.
Oh, wow. That is hilarious. Yeah, I'm sure there have got to be dozens of things. Nothing exactly like that is coming to mind, but you mentioned kind of like the sound
You're
of the
just not a big social deviant like the rest of us.
Well, no, I definitely have been.
Well, that's all, my friends. Unfortunately, the tech gremlins that live in my laptop ate the rest of the interview. Nancy has agreed to come back and visit again and be another guest on another episode because we had some incredible conversations. We talked about some things that I definitely do not want you to miss and want to share with you. Thank you so much for joining Nancy and I today. And remember, we come together as autistics in this late identified community to elevate and raise the consciousness, the awareness, and our cause, our lives, our experiences, and our voices. If you have gone and tried to get your answer and gone to get that external validation and you've been denied that answer that you deserve, know that you don't have to give up. Don't stop seeking. And as a community, as late identified autistics, we're coming together to address this, to lift up our voices, to share our experiences, and to be the leaders in our lives and in our cause as we go forward, so that the next person who goes to get their answer and get that external validation isn't told, you can't possibly be autistic because. The future of autism is bright, and my friend Hunter Hansen did a fantastic YouTube video about how he looks at and sees the future of autism. Take a few minutes and go watch it. I'm going to put it in the link in the show notes below. And I've started a new segment this year in 2021 called Ask Hey Carole Jean, where you can ask your questions. Send them to my email address with the subject line, Hey Carole Jean, and ask me your question and I'll be sure to answer it in my weekly Instagram Live and on the YouTube channel, Mind Your Autistic Brain. You may have a burning question that you have been dying to know the answer to, or to go a little bit deeper. And I'm so happy to pull together any resources and insight or knowledge that I have to share with you. As we come together, we are elevating and lifting and raising each and every one of us, but we have to do it together. This year in 2021, everything that I'm doing is about better together and collaboration, because we've been alone for decades, feeling like no one understood us. And we're finally here together. We found our people. We found other people who have had experiences and similar things that have happened in their past. And as we come together, we're doing this together and we're sharing so that we each are reaching our very best selves. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for being here. You are a blessing each and every day in my life. Have a wonderful week, my friend. See you soon.